Get the out! Yes, that was my mic check. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Business Blaze. I am Mr. Blaze. As several, there's a public contact email address for this channel, and people there'll be sponsors asking for if they can sponsor me. There'll be MCNs constantly asking me to join up. And if you're a YouTuber, pro tip here, don't join an MCN. It's a waste of money. They just take your money and they give you nothing. They will promise you. They'll be like, oh, well, we have a legal team. So if you ever get into any trouble, you can consult our legal team. Oh, you've got a problem with demonetization. Oh, we'll sort you out. But the reality is, it's all bullshit. It's all a set. I was with an MCN that I won't name because I don't want to get sued, but it's one of the big ones. People will mention it in the comments below. And obviously that is a public forum where I cannot control, but I'm certainly not going to delete the comments mentioning the name of this MCN, which actually changed its name. Oh my god, what a steaming pile of shit. Do not join it. Why are we talking about MCNs? What's going on? Do not join an MCN. Fucking hell. That was a bad business decision. Mega projects. No, Magellan. That's what's sponsoring today's episode. Magellan TV. Those absolute legends. Discover a new type of documentary film experience with Magellan TV and its binge-worthy documentaries updated every week. More on them in a bit, but if you'd like to get started right now, there is, of course, a link below, courtesy of Mr. Blaze. That's how. When I know when someone's just generically emailing me, they've never seen my because they're like, dear Mr. Blaze. And I'm like, wait, you looked at my channel called Business Blaze and you really thought my name was like Mr. Business Blaze. It's like, what's going on? But okay, if you want to give me money, let's talk. This is history's greatest acts of revenge. Danny writes the script about this is absolutely nothing to do with business. I will read it. Sam will sprinkle in some fine vintage memes. I am realizing that this channel is just like, how much percentage do you reckon this channel is just inside jokes? I don't know why it continues to grow, but thousands more people subscribe to this channel every month to get inside. He-Man meme, another inside joke. To get inside on those inside jokes, you can always go back and watch the old episodes. Let's just get started, shall we? On today's Business Blaze menu, we're looking at some of history's greatest examples of a dish that is traditionally best served cold. And it turns out we're not talking about quiche. I have said quiche is quite nice warm, also delicious cold. I hated quiche as a kid, and as an adult, I grew to absolutely love quiche. Like, I used to like omelettes as a child. As an adult, I'm like, why would I have an omelette? It's like a quiche without the delicious pastry. Danny, was that legitimately in the introduction? I think I started making too much fun of Danny's enormously long introductions on Business Blaze. So he just gave me 3 lines. But Danny, the script's like 9 pages long. The point of having the shorter introduction is so that we have, these videos don't like grow out into like 40-minute monstrosities. Anyway, let's get going. Comrade Tank Girl, the hero of the Soviet Union, the hero we all need. One good thing about these experimental shorter introductions, here we go, thank you Danny, is that we get into the juicy communism much quicker, oh god. And it's surely common knowledge that there's one type of woman you really don't ever want to piss off, and it's a dedicated communist telephone operator. Everyone knows that, Danny. It's like, things you need to know in life. Save a retirement, and don't piss off the communist telephone operators. Maria, Jesus Christ, Oktyabrskaya was born into a poor peasant family in 1905, and was that peasant is such a great word. I don't know what it is about peasant, but it's like, you absolute peasant. It's like, peasant.
Is this some sort of peasant joke that I'm too rich to understand?
No.
In 1905, she was actually considered to be a serf during her first few years. Less cool, just peasant. A term which has largely gone out of fashion since medieval times and was really just a fancy word for slave. Maria and her family could barely pick their own noses without permission from the landlord. And that's maybe why she became quite attracted to the concept of communism when she got a bit older. Communism freed Maria from slavery, and it gave her opportunity to pursue an education and then a career as a telephone operator. I don't know why I'm making fun of this. Like, communism, if you're poor, if you're really broke-ass peasant, you'd be like, yeah, communism sounds pretty great. It's like, wait, they're going to take the money from the rich people and make sure that everyone has equal opportunities and jobs and stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, I'm just an uneducated peasant, but I'd sure like to be a nuclear physicist. I'm loyal to the party, promote me. She became even more devoted to the cause when she married her sweetheart Soviet army officer, Ilya, oh, Jesus Christ, well, it's her surname again. And later claimed, marry a serviceman and you serve in the army. Okay, so what, she served in the army? I'm so confused. But then the horrors of the Second World War stretched in the Soviet Union. It's like, I'm serving in the army alongside the Second World War. That, right? When Hitler launched an invasion of the communist utopia in June of 1941. Husband Ilya was sent off to fight with the 206th Rifle Division, while Maria, along with her family and friends, was evacuated to Tomsk in Siberia, where she picked up another telephone operator position and spent the next 2 long years anxiously awaiting the return of the love of her life. During that whole period, Danny, I feel like when we don't have a mega long introduction, I don't get all warmed up. I'm like, what's going on? I haven't been broken into it. It's just suddenly into the actual facts. During that whole period, I was unaware that Ilya had actually been killed by the Nazis very early on in the battle, getting shot down by a machine gun blast while leading a charge near Kiev. Yeah, Nazis, right? When she finally received the dreaded telegram 2 years after the event, it's fair to say that Maria hit the roof, and not just at Siberia's sloppy postal service. She vowed to take revenge on the Nazis who had taken the life of her husband, but her first idea fell at the first hurdle. Maria volunteered, is it Maria? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but let's just call her Maria for ease. Maria volunteered to fight on the front line, but her application was understandably rejected on the ground that she was pushing 38 by this time and was suffering from tuberculosis. She was also a woman. I know the communists, like, one good thing about communism is they were very into equal rights for, like, men and women being on an equal standing. But, I don't know if women should be allowed to serve on the front line. Is that sexist in 2021? I'm like, I don't know. Men are biologically stronger. We can't deny that. It's like, if you're going to be in a hand-to-hand knife fight with someone in the Taliban or something, is this like, I don't know, it feels very 2003. It's gonna be a dude, right? I don't feel that's sexist. Cancel Simon. Hashtag cancel Simon. So she did the next best thing. She sold everything she owned and blew every last ruble of her life savings on a massive T-34 tank and pledged to drive it on the front line herself to single-handedly kick some Nazi ass. Well, that's how the legend goes, and it's fairly close to the truth. What she actually did was write a letter to Joseph Stalin with an offer to donate 50,000 rubles to the Soviet Union. What's going on? It's communism. Just be like, Stalin would be like, oh, you've got 50,000 rubles? Well, give that to me so fast, or I will gulag your ass quicker than the Nazis invaded the motherland. It was given on the condition that it would be spent on a T-34 tank, which she would be allowed to drive herself. In a letter she wrote, my husband was killed in action defending motherland. I want revenge on fascist dogs for his death and death of Soviet people tortured by fascist barbarians. Perhaps, surprisingly, Stalin personally responded with an agreement to the deal. He may have been swayed by the idea that a disgruntled female telephone operator joining the front might boost morale and be of some propaganda value. Absolutely, I'd be like, yeah, get on it. Maria's new comrades in the 26th Guards Tank Brigade weren't initially quite so keen, though, when she first rolled up with the T-34, which she had christened the Fighting Girlfriends. They thought that this was a daft publicity stunt and that Maria probably wouldn't be able to get her head around the reverse parking. I think the reality is, tank park where tank wants. In fact, Maria received 5 months of intense training before she was allowed into battle, which was unusual during a period when most Soviet soldiers just had to make do with a quick morning workshop before being deemed fit to go out and get shot at. The Defense Committee obviously realized that this angry widow could be a high-profile soldier, and they didn't want to risk losing her too early. Any doubts about Tank Girl's abilities were soon put to rest when Maria drove into her first battle in Smolensk in October of 1943. Fighting Girlfriend was the first tank to breach enemy lines, and no mercy was shown as Maria plowed through the Nazis, took out the machine gun nests and artillery guns, and literally crushed enemy troops under the treads of her T-34. I mean, I know they're Nazis, but shit. Shortly after being promoted to sergeant for her heroic efforts, Maria went into battle again at Novoye Selo in Vitebsk. This time around, she found herself in a bit of a pickle when a tank was immobilized by enemy gunfire. She was ordered by her superiors to remain in the tank, but Maria didn't have time for any of that nonsense.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
She hopped out with a couple of spanners and a monkey wrench, fixed up the tank while dodging artillery fire, and then jumped back inside to resume shooting at the Nazis. Now hailed as the goddess of steel by her comrades, Maria was clearly riding high on a wave of furious vengeance. Writing back home to her sister, she reported, I've had my baptism by fire. I beat the bastard. Sometimes I'm so angry I can't even breathe. I'm gonna stop with the Russian accent because I know it's It's just I like doing it. There is something about Russian accent. It is a nice one to do. You speak like you have big marble in mouth. Sadly, Maria's war came to an end in January 1944 during the Leningrad-Novgorod offensive, although she had again crushed swaths of Nazis along with their machine gun nests and self-propelled guns. She again got stopped in her tracks when fighting girlfriend was hit by an anti-tank shell. That's the worst sort of shell to be hit by when you're in a tank. She hopped out of the vehicle and to get stuck into the repairs, but this time she was struck in the head by shell fragments and died from her wounds. Maria was posthumously awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest possible distinction for heroic feats in service to the state and society. Not even the bloke who wrote Tetris got one of those. The story behind Tetris is soup. Did we cover this on Business Blaze already? Like how Tetris was made by the communists and now I think it's owned, I don't know who it's owned by, but they're very, apparently they're very litigious about keeping Tetris protected. Okay, moving on. The $200 billion payback. This may not be one of the greatest acts of revenge. Danny, I asked you to write a video about the greatest acts of revenge. Number 2, this might not be a great... Come on, Danny! You had one job!
Otherwise, I'll throw you off my land and give your job to... What's that one called?
But it's certainly a contender for one of the pettiest, most stupid, and certainly most expensive. Well, I mean, if this video does well, the next video is probably going to be the pettiest acts of revenge, the one after that, the most stupid acts of revenge, and then the one after that, the most expensive acts of revenge. You can see how I'm a YouTube big brain. You know you've really got on somebody's wrong side when they throw away $200 billion on making you stop for a minute to think about what you did. Warren Buffett is a now legendary American investor and business tycoon who was running a relatively small hedge fund partnership back in the 1960s and had just made his first million. Crafty Warren had noticed predictable patterns emerging in the share price of the textile conglomerate Berkshire Hathaway and was making another small fortune on buying and selling stock in the company despite the steady decline of the textile industry as a whole. By 1964, it was so cold outside today. I was walking to work and my beard froze. Like I got to work and there were like big chunks of ice in my beard and I was like, holy sh**. It was minus 14 Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. And I don't care. By 1964, as a major shareholder, he was pushing the company to make some tough, profit-driven decisions, which would help alleviate some of Berkshire Hathaway's more immediate money troubles. But he locked horns with president of the company, Seaburn Stanton, who was more of a dyed-in-the-wool, textile loyalist. Seabury wanted to preserve as many mills and as jobs as possible, even if this strategy meant weaving a loom of doom in the long term. Once again, that doesn't sound like a very good way to run a business, Mr. Stanton. Seabury Stanton eventually... Also, what the first name is Seabury? It's like, I mean, that's like Blaze. Is Blaze actually I feel like Blaze is actually a name. Seabury doesn't sound like a name. It sounds like he's got 2 surnames, Seabury Stanton. Like, you could definitely have John Seabury and John Stanton. Anyway, this weirdly named dude got fed up with Warren Buffett and decided that the investor just had too much stake in the company. The pair held a polite conversation in which Warren agreed to sell his 200,000 shares in Berkshire Hathaway back to the company for $11.50 a share. It was a reasonable offer on both sides, as Warren figured that he was keen to get out of the dying textiles industry anyway and focus on investing in the insurance sector. After shaking on the deal, Warren went back home to Omaha and waited for Seabury to send him the official contract, but he wasn't happy when the final contract landed on the doormat. He discovered that despite the verbal agreement, Seabury had listed the price on the contract as $11.375 per share, $0.125, so 12.5 cents less than they'd agreed on. Or to put it another way, an eighth of a dollar less, as back then all share prices on the US stock market were quoted in eighths, which makes kind of sense. I mean, looking at it now, it's like, how do you say half a cent? Like 12.5 cents, I guess? It is a bit weird. In the grand scheme of things, although obviously that's going to make it a real nightmare when you're doing some calculations like, oh, where's the 8th button? In the grand scheme of things, it may not have seemed like a massive amount considering the scale of the deal, but Warren Buffett was furious that Seabury Stanton was trying to chisel him for an eighth. Yeah, I mean, don't be a dick. Just do what you agreed on. So he did what any budding business tycoon would have done. He popped into the office to have a quiet word with Seabury over a slice of blueberry pie, and they amicably sorted out the misunderstanding. I get this is one of those things where daddy's like, actually, they had a big-ass fight. No, of course they didn't do that. That's what a loser would do. And everyone knows if there's one thing Warren Buffett is not, it is a loser, because he is a consistent and outrageous winner. Instead, Warren not only refused to sell the shares, he actively went about buying more and more of them until he reached a position where he had seized control of the company. Legend. I know this story. The sun's shining in my eyes because there's a car parked outside my window. It's reflecting the sun into my eyes. And I don't have any blinds. Anyway, Warren Buffett's being a legend or some that. And the first thing he did as the new chair of the executive committee was to fire Seabury Stanton just out of spite. Love it. It's like a scene out of a movie. Like Warren Buffett rolls in, he's got 51% of the company, and he's like, yo, Seabury, you're in my office. And Seabury's like, what are you talking about? This is my office. Not anymore, bitch. Get the out. Well, that's the yarn that Warren spins himself. Alternative versions of the story claim that Seabury Stanton quickly resigned before he actually got the official push, but it's certainly clear that his plan to chisel an eighth from Warren resulted in him losing his job as president. Warren had certainly taught Seabury Stanton a lesson, and the ousted president seemed to do little else of note until his death 7 years later. But if we're being ultra picky, we could point out that Warren's act of revenge had left him as the majority shareholder of a failing textile business that he never really wanted in the first place, and he could no longer afford to invest in the insurance industry on the scale he had originally planned, as his finances were now tied up in increasingly loose threads. Danny, I'm getting really tired of this. Warren now claims that it was the dumbest investment he'd ever made and a monumentally stupid decision, which he freely admits was driven by revenge. He reckons that buying Berkshire Hathaway instead of buying a good insurance company cost him $200 billion in lost compounded interest over the next 45 years. But Warren is still the chairman and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway today, and neither he nor his company has done too badly. After shutting down the textile operations in 1985 and transforming into a multinational conglomerate holding company, Berkshire Hathaway is now the third largest corporation by total revenue, and Warren is the fourth richest man in the world with a net worth of over $85 billion. And there's different types of rich. Even though like Elon Musk or whatever is worth $200 million, it's because the price of Tesla's shares are super high, whereas Warren has like a super diverse portfolio that he could more easily liquidate. Like in many ways, Warren Buffett is richer. So it was probably all worth it just to see the look on Seabury's face. This has been half an episode of Business Blaze, and now, dear friends, kind viewers, loyal blazers and legends, I present to you today's glorious sponsor, Magellan TV. I know it's Magellan. I'm just making fun. There's another sponsor which I constantly pronounce wrong because I just have it in my mind as being pronounced another way. They don't complain, which is nice when I pronounce their company the wrong way. Anyway, Magellan TV is a new documentary streaming service. Founded by filmmakers. It always says here, founded by filmmakers for the love of history, which always sounds weird, and I always say it, who love history. I just think that sounds better. They believe in that old adage about studying history. You can't know where you're going until you know where you've been. As a result, Magellan TV has one of the richest catalogues of history content available pretty much anywhere today. Everything from the Greeks to the Great War, plus modern history, biography, scientific profiles, true crime, and so much more. Their team of producers and content developers look all over the world for new documentaries to add to their library, updating it every single week. I know they look all over the world. I almost always watch English ones because I don't like reading subtitles because I'm lazy. Also, there's so much stuff on there. It's like, by the time you need to get into like the Swedish documentaries, you're like, you've watched a lot of I mean, not high quality documentaries. I just meant like as in loads, not as in actual feces. I mean like representing poor quality Look, Magellan TV doesn't, it's very good. I'm digging myself a hole. Let's carry on. The end product is as if like Netflix was designed by your favorite history provider. I didn't study history. I had a teacher at school. No, okay, fine. Let's not pick this apart too much, Magellan. Magellan, I know. And also with Magellan, no ads, which is fantastic, obviously. So, if you're looking for more than 3,000 4K explorations, it's in 4K as well, which is legit, because 4K looks tight. Exploration, binge-worthy topics, and more content added every single week, then you should consider Magellan TV. Today, given the tank one we talked about earlier, I'm going to recommend Titans of War, Evolution of the Battle Tank, which is a very interesting documentary, which this is not really business related, so I think we can recommend something. Often they're like, relate something related to the content. I'm like, well, this isn't business related. I don't think there's anything particularly about, not that I've seen, about Warren Buffett. So definitely check out Titans of War, Evolution of the Battle Tank. Why not? What am I doing? So if you want to make an amazing addition to your streaming lineup, just click that link in the description below and Magellan are going to hook you up. Look, that's a great way to support the show. Show Magellan some love because it shows Business Blaze some love and it shows me some love. There's so much love, like my heart. Shoemaker loses his I often used to wander home alone through the town very late at night. And looking back now, it's quite amazing that I wasn't beaten up more often. Danny, I don't know. It's probably because you cut a very menacing figure. It only happened once. I was minding my business. What? You got beaten up? I was minding my own business and looking forward to getting home for a cup of Bovril when a gang of delinquents randomly jumped me. I was quite fortunate in that I only got a bloody nose and a couple of bruised legs before they got bored and wandered off. Danny, did you get what the is going on? What is going on in Rotherham? Number of times I've been randomly beaten up on the street. zero. And it's not like people are like, oh, don't want to mess with that guy. A friend of mine called Nick had a much worse experience. You usually wouldn't want to mess with Nick because he's over 6 feet tall and built like a brick shit house. But even he struggled to fend off his 8 random... What the is going on in Rotherham? I mean, I know there's the whole child sex scandal thing, which is the first thing you find when you Google the name Rotherham, which is obviously, you know, if you're like, where should I move to in the UK? And you're Googling towns and it's like, well, not there. Also, what is with this? What, the random beatings? What is going on? This is the UK! He ended up on crutches for over a year, during which time he had plenty of opportunity to plot his revenge. What the is going on? I say it again! He managed to find out the identity and home address of each and every one of his attackers, and after it finally recovered and could walk again, he tracked them all down one by one, followed them until they were alone, and then offered them a rematch in a one-on-one fight, which he deemed would be a bit more fair. He was very polite about the whole thing, but the offer of a rematch was not optional, and he certainly got his point across by playing the long game. If this is true, Danny, that is scary. It just struck me that after patting myself on the back for the super short introduction, I now think I've moved the real introductions into the middle of the script. That's why it's still 9 pages, Danny. But my point is that the truly epic stories of revenge are often the ones which the protagonist displays quite admirable levels of patience. Yeah, the longer you wait, the better it is. And they don't come much more epic than the heartwarming tale of the kindly 19th century shoemaker. That may sound like a bit like a German fairy tale, but it goes a bit darker than the Brothers Grimm, and it doesn't feature any industrious elves. Although, as we've talked about before on Business Blaze, fairy tales. Yeah, I don't know about the Brothers Grimm. I remember I'm familiar with it, but there's like Snow White and it's like she gets raped like twice and then gets pregnant from the raping and while she's asleep. It's up. Like fairy tales are really up. I think I should do a channel talking about fairy tales where we break down how up they are. That'd be great. Although I'd never make any money from it. It'd be totally demonetized. It's like, yeah, Snow White, the rape queen. It'd be like, shit. I mean, she's not the rape queen. She gets, so it'd be like the rape king. What are we talking about? This video is going to get demonetized. Remember to support Magellan. Magellan are going to be like, Simon, we don't want talk of rape in the video that we sponsor. Although the absolute legends. I never, just as a policy, I never mention these sponsors in a video that is sponsored by someone else. But let's just say one of my other sponsors sponsored the 10 best terrorist attacks, and we're like, yeah, green light. So legends. I can't believe I got away with that. Didn't get monetized, sadly. And it's worth bearing in mind that some of the details from this early 19th century story are a little vague and can't be definitively confirmed. It's a little worrying that one of the key witnesses is a ghost. Oh god. But the bare bones of the story are documented in the works of a French police archivist called Jacques Pichot, who published the evidence he had gleaned from a grisly deathbed confession. A shoemaker from Nimes in France called Pierre Picot was all set to marry his beautiful fiancée in the year 1807. 4 of his good buddies were feeling a bit jealous of their shoemaker pal, and so just 8 days before the wedding, they conspired around a pub table to play a practical joke on Pierre. 3 of them, Chabat, Salari, and Lupion, thought it might be a bit of a giggle to try and delay the wedding in some way. The 4th, Alut, decided he wanted no part in the scheme as he considered it to be in quite poor taste. And considering that the plan was to have Pierre falsely arrested for being an English spy, you can't really blame him. Yeah, dude, I mean, this is like back... Spies are not going to have a great time today in, you know, the prisons of a foreign government. In the early 1800s, this guy's gonna get like hung or some shit, isn't he? No, he's gonna get his revenge, so I don't know. He's gonna go to prison for a while. They should have just gone with the idea of putting itching powder down his pants or something. After the trio of ne'er-do-wells reported on Pierre to the authorities, the innocent shoemaker was banged up in the prison fortress Fenestrelle for 7 years. Oh my god. Pranks gone wrong. That puts in you like pranks gone wrong. Like, you know, you get those YouTube videos where it's like the pranks that went wrong and they're great to watch. But this was just like, yeah, what happened? He went to prison for 7 years. It appears his former friends and family just forgot about him and left him to rot in prison. During his incarceration, Pierre was never even aware why he had been imprisoned or who was behind the foul plot, but he probably had his suspicions, considering that he'd been given 7 years to chew them over. But it wasn't all bad news. Well, let's be honest, it was mostly bad news. But Pierre was at least able to dig a small passageway into the neighboring cell and became good friends with an Italian priest called Father Torri, who had also been locked up for reasons that he couldn't begin to fathom. It just so happens that Father Torri was also proper minted and had a stash of treasure buried in a secret location in Milan. The years passed and Pierre longed for the day where he would be reunited with his fiancée. He was eventually released along with busloads of other prisoners following the fall of the Imperial French government in 1814. Lucky for him. Sadly, Father Torri didn't didn't live to see the day, but before he died he bequeathed his hidden treasure to Pierre and revealed the secret location. So upon his release, Pierre grabbed the loot from Milan and then returned to France under a new identity. He first learned the details of the fiendish plot that had led to his imprisonment from the fourth guy, Alut, who in exchange for a diamond spilled the beans on the wedding day prank that had gone slightly out of hand. These guys must be like just chilling out 7 years later. Oh yeah, what happened to Pierre? Well, we sent him to prison for 5 years for a crime he didn't commit just before he was getting married. And he just got out because there was some sort of revolution. And he's rich. And he's hiding. You'd be like, maybe I'll give him a ring, see how he's doing, see if he's pissed. Shortly afterwards, the first of the mischievous trio, Shabar, was found dead on the Bridge of Arts with a dagger in his back. On a note had been wrapped around the handle which simply read, "Number 1. Oh, dude, number 2, and whoever else is like, maybe I'm not gonna give him a ring, maybe I'm just gonna right off out of here. A little later, Solaris died in excruciating pain from poisoning. This might have been considered a coincidence were it not for the fact that during his funeral, a note was discovered on top of the coffin which read number 2. But Pierre saved his most bitter act of revenge for Lupion, who had now really pissed off Pierre. It turns out that Lupion and Create had copped off with Pierre's former fiancée. Not long after the prank, the couple were now married and had a son and daughter. Oh, dude, you're gonna have a bad time. Pierre framed the son for stealing gold jewelry and had him thrown in prison. Later, he somehow tricked the daughter into marrying a criminal, who he then grasped on and had arrested. The daughter apparently died from shock during the actual arrest. Now it sounds like we're drifting into legends, but maybe. Like people dying of shock. I'm like, I mean, of course it can happen, but I don't think young people die of shock very often. For an encore, Pierre burns Lupion's successful restaurant down to the ground, and just as a disgraced and devastated Lupion was thinking about putting in an insurance claim, wondering why his life had turned to dude, how do you not know this? The number 1, the number 2, you'd be like, what? That's a coincidence. 2 of my friends have died. What? Have we done anything bad in the past that might have led to this? I don't think so. What the f***, you dumb? Who did my wife used to be engaged to? Pierre turned up on his doorstep and stabbed him in the heart. I don't think Pierre bothered with number 3 signage, as there was now possibly nobody left alive to appreciate the gesture. Although apparently Lupion didn't either, because he had no idea what was going on. Well, I suppose there was still Alut, and for reasons that are not entirely clear, Pierre was himself ultimately abducted and murdered by Alut. That's a twist. Maybe Alut had judged Pierre's revenge-driven killing spree to be in quite poor taste. He's like the avenger of poor taste. Or maybe he was concerned that he might be next in line, having witnessed the conspiracy without doing anything about it. Yeah, dude, that's probably much more realistic. And it was on Alut's own deathbed that this story was shared for the first time with the police. Alut couldn't have known the details about Pierre's time in the prison fortress, or the shoemaker's friendship with the wealthy Italian priest, but he claimed to have been visited by the ghost of Father Torre, who hopefully filled in some of the blanks of the story. Sounds likely. It's quite possible that some elements of the tale are complete bollocks, but the archivist Jacques Pachot reckons that most of the details match up with other police files and documents.
True story.
And if all of this sounds familiar, it might be because the author Alexandre Dumas stole the story and used it for the basis of his 1844 novel, The Count of Monte Cristo. Of course, I've never read it. I'm very tempted to take Nick's revenge story and adapt it into a screenplay. We could get Quentin Tarantino or Francis Ford Coppola to direct it. Fantastic. The Godfather of Spam. Is this the final one? It is the final one, finally! A more modern story, which is perhaps one of the greatest examples of a truly fitting act of revenge, which the victim most definitely had coming. Michigan businessman Alan Rowski is a complete he's not even a businessman. He made a fortune purely on the concept of spanning. I don't know if this guy's still alive. Let's just say he's allegedly a complete bellend. He launched a glittering career in spam back in 1996 when he first learned how to use a computer. Rowski figured out that he could make loads of money from pump and dump schemes. He would acquire a huge volume of penny stocks and shares in obscure companies which were going nowhere, then send out millions of emails which excitedly suggested that the recipient should quickly invest before they missed the boat. That is very clever, and it also sounds quite illegal. You know, one of those things where it's like, I don't know what the law would be there, but I mean, I'd definitely be like, I'm gonna check with a lawyer before I do this. The subsequent influx of new stock purchases would naturally inflate the price until Rowski eventually decided to dump all his own stock and then send the value hurtling back down again at the expense of all his misled victims. Over the next few years, Rowski built up a spam engine and reached the point where his excuse for a company was sending out over 1 billion spam emails every single day. Good lord. And he had no shame. He didn't think of himself as a spammer. He considered himself to be a perfectly legitimate commercial emailer and would often give interviews in the media in which he proudly showed off his lavish lifestyle and the wealth he had generated from becoming the internet's biggest dickhead, allegedly. It was one such boastful interview in the Detroit News in 2002 that would prove to be one of his biggest regrets. The article featured photographs from Rowski's 8,000 square foot mansion, and users of the social news website Slashdot were quick to identify the exact location and address of Rowski's posh pad. Dude, when you are spamming that many people, there's going to be a lot of people who are pissed at you. Over the course of the next few weeks, thousands of disgruntled spam victims signed up Alan Rowski to pretty much every catalogue on the internet. You're gonna have to move house. At the height of the Jolly Wheeze, Rowski was receiving over 100 pounds of junk mail at his mansion every single day, and found it impossible to identify any genuinely important mail that might be lurking in one of the pasties' bulging sacks. And he got quite upset about the whole thing. Without any trace of self-awareness, he gave an interview to the Detroit Free Press in which he declared, "They've signed me up for every advertising campaign and mailing list there is. These people are out of their minds. They're harassing me." It's like, dude, you don't see the irony. How? The quite brilliant slice of meaty revenge didn't seem to cause Rowski too much damage in the short term, though. By 2006, his company was still pulling in a revenue of about $2.6 million a year. But the good news is that Rowski's past eventually caught up with him. Following the discovery of his involvement with email stock schemes in 2009, Rowski pled guilty to charges of wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, and violation of the Can Spam Act. He was fined $250,000 and sentenced to 4 years and 3 months in the can. Oh no. It would be nice to think that maybe during his incarceration he dug a small passageway to the neighboring cell and became good friends with the prisoner next door, but instead of a wealthy Italian priest, his neighbor turned out to be a Nigerian prince who was just seeking a small favor from a friend. Danny, bravo. This was so long, even though you didn't have a bloody introduction. This has been an episode of Business Blaze. I have been Mr. Blaze. Says all the spam coming my way. If you would like to support Business Blaze, and if you'd like to have a fantastic time, you need to check out today's sponsor, Magellan TV. You need to purchase some merch at purchathemerch.co. And if you're thinking, boy, Simon, do you have a luscious, healthy-looking beard or what? Well, I've got a beard oil. It's called beardblaze.com. Pick it up there. Thank you for watching. Because 4K looks tight.